getting a good night's sleep might be something loads of us look forward to. But for my next guest, it's quite the opposite. Nurse Bella Andreou lives with a condition that's been called Sleeping Beauty Syndrome, which causes her to sleep for up to 2 weeks at a time. It's left Bella understandably scared to go to sleep, and she joins me now. Bella, thanks for coming in to talk about this, because this is one of those illnesses that doesn't sound real. So can you just explain how it all started for you?
Yeah, so I was 17. I'd just finished my first year of A-levels. I went to a party with some friends. It's the first time I tried alcohol, and I had a bit too much. Went home, went to sleep, and I thought I woke up with a hangover. But this hangover sort of symptoms that lasted for 10 days. And in them 10 days, I was sleeping for 18 hours a day, dead disorientated. I couldn't really recognise who my parents were. Childlike behaviour. So my parents in the end thought I'd got spiked or something had happened with the alcohol. And then this happened again 4 weeks later, and it was in this sort of monthly sort of period of me having these episodes of sleeping for 10 to 14 days, along with these other symptoms. And
can I ask, when you say, because that just sounds completely mad to be sleeping for 14 days. So were you waking up to go to the loo and stuff like that? Were you eating or drinking or anything? How does it work?
To begin with, obviously, we didn't know something was wrong. So my parents just thought I had a really, really bad hangover, something like that. So they left me to sleep, realising then, maybe we should wake her up so she can have some food and go to the toilet. So my parents would have to wake me up. And when they would wake me up, I'd just be dead disorientated. Like I said, I wouldn't recognise who they were. I'd speak like a child. And that's not typically who I was. I was quite like a normal, outgoing, bubbly young girl. And then after the 2 weeks, I had one night of insomnia. Obviously, I'd slept for 18 plus hours a day. Yeah. And I wouldn't remember it. I wouldn't remember the last 2 weeks.
So you wouldn't remember at all any of that time, what you'd done, what you'd...
No, I'd have to. My mum would sort of be like, right, Mum, what have I done this time? And then that kept going on. And I was on the pill at the time, so we thought it was a reaction to the pill. We thought it was linked to sort of, my time of the month. Yeah. And in the end, my parents took me to the GP when I was having another one of these episodes about 2 months later. And the GP, absolutely no idea. They said, could this be an attention thing? Could it be some sort of behavioural problem? And my parents were absolutely adamant. I can't remember this. But they were adamant, this is just not Bella. And then in the end, I think I was coming out of an episode. And I went to school because my parents were like, well, what do we do? Yeah. And I collapsed at school. The paramedics were called. And my sixth form teacher at the time, had to convince the paramedics that I wasn't on drugs or hadn't taken anything because I was absolutely out of it, for me to get seen. And then that's when the whole process came of getting diagnosed with KLS.
Yes, and so KLS, just tell us, so that's what
Sleeping Beauty Syndrome, it's sometimes called, but it's called Kleine Levin Syndrome. And it's this neurological sort of condition where it's very rare, you sleep, I'm lucky, it only affects me sort of 2 weeks at a time, but you're sleeping for 18 plus hours of the day, disorientated, childlike behaviour, you don't know who you are, where you are.
This must be really scary for you.
Yes, it is. It used to affect me when I was younger, sort of 17 to 19 or 20, every month. So it would always happen every 4 weeks. So I remember I used to sort of do everything I could and fill my sort of time in for the 3 weeks that I knew I was going to be sort of alive. And then sort of it would feel like I'd died for sort of 2 weeks and just have to crack on.
But you've managed, despite this, to qualify as a nurse and all of that. So is it that you've managed to get on top of it, or have the symptoms just lessened for you? How often do you have an episode now?
So now it's once every 6 months, which is amazing because I used to, like I said, have them at once every month. For my A-levels, did my A-levels over 3 years rather than 2 years. Uni were amazing, sort of gave me extensions for deadlines of assessments and stuff like that. And then I stopped having them when I qualified as a nurse for 2 years, from about 2020 to August of 2022. And then they reappeared last August, one every sort of 6 months.
And it must be, I know your partner's here with you today, just again to look after you and stuff. Yeah. It must be hard, for relationships and things like that with this.
Well, I personally think she loves it because at least I can't backchat her for 2 weeks. So she's in heaven. But no, it is
2 weeks off.
It's 2 weeks off. No, it is. It's not what a 24 and 25-year-old. It's not what you sort of expect to get in sort of life. But I'm just really thankful it only affects me for sort of 2 weeks at a time. It's only every sort of 6 months, and I've been able to sort of achieve a normal relative life outside of that. So I can't complain. It affects other people a lot more. Sort of people can have episodes for 80 plus days. So for me to only get them 14 days at a time, I feel lucky.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to bring in an expert on all of this, Professor Guy Leschner, who's a professor of neurology and sleep medicine. Professor, Bella's just done a brilliant explanation of it. Can you give us the medical version of what this syndrome is?
Yeah, well, Bella's explanation is absolutely classical. Essentially, this is a very rare neurological disorder that we think affects about 1 to 5 per million. So that's really hundreds at most in the UK who have this diagnosis. It's so rare that we have very poor understanding of what causes it, but it clearly has got some abnormalities that we can see on brain imaging, for example, or on looking at the brain waves. I think it's very important to say that we don't really have any fundamental understanding of what causes it, although we do know that there are potentially some genetic factors at play.
Yeah, and so, because there could be people at home watching who might have some of these symptoms but have never known what it is or what to do about it. How do you get a diagnosis?
Well, unfortunately, there's no positive test that we can do to make the diagnosis. So it's really a case of recognising the pattern. And I think Bella describes that very well, that actually until somebody recognises that this might be Kleine Levin syndrome, this diagnosis is never raised in the first place. So one of the things that we often do is do lots of tests to try and exclude other possibilities. And also it's important to see somebody who is at least familiar with the diagnosis and raises it in the first place.
And what can you do if you do find out you have it? Is it anything treatable, or is it just something you have to manage?
Well, it's not curable at the moment, and there are some medications that we can give to try and either keep people more awake, although those are often unsuccessful. There are some other medications that we can give that in some individuals can reduce the frequency and the severity of their attacks, although they don't work in everyone. So a lot of it is about avoiding triggers, and we know, as Bella described, alcohol is a very common trigger for these attacks, and so we generally tend to recommend that people with Kleine Levin syndrome avoid alcohol completely. Other triggers can be jet lag, sleep deprivation, stress, or severe illness, for example. So it's about understanding the condition and trying to prevent these episodes from happening.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Professor, thank you very much for your time and explaining all that to us. And Bella, as ever, thank you for coming in for a chat about all this too. Still to come, agony